My name is Neil Carter, and for exactly 31 days, my wife pretended I didn't exist. Not the passive-aggressive kind of ignoring where she'd slam cabinet doors or give me the cold shoulder. No, this was surgical precision, complete erasure. I became a ghost in my own house, haunting the hallways of a life I thought I'd built. I'm 40 years old, an architect with a decent firm in downtown Boston. I design office buildings and strip malls, nothing that'll win awards, but it pays for our Colonial in Newton and keeps Andrea in her designer suits. Or it used to, anyway, before she decided I was furniture. The silence started after her law firm's annual party. I wasn't invited. Apparently spouses were optional this year. When she came home at 3 a.m, lipstick smeared and reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't mine, I made the mistake of asking how it went. "Fine," she said, and that was the last word she spoke to me for a month. Andrea Carter, my wife of 18 years, is the kind of woman who commands attention when she walks into a room. Tall, blonde, with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. She manages the operations at Henderson & Associates, one of Boston's premier corporate law firms. Everyone there worships her, especially her boss, Mark Feldman. Mark Pumper Feldman, a nickname from his college wrestling days that he still uses on his vanity plates. 45 years old, drives a silver Mercedes, and has the kind of smug smile that makes you want to check your wallet. He's married to some socialite named Patricia, but that doesn't stop him from calling our house at all hours, ostensibly about urgent client matters. The morning after the party, I tried making coffee for 2. Andrea walked into the kitchen, saw the second cup, and poured it down the drain without a word. She grabbed her purse and left. No goodbye, no acknowledgement that I existed. That became the pattern. I'd ask about her day, silence. I'd suggest dinner plans. She'd leave the room. I'd try to kiss her goodnight. She'd turn away like I was contagious. Our daughter Chloe, 22 and finishing her final year at Boston College Law, followed her mother's lead. Suddenly, family dinners became mother-daughter affairs, and I ate alone in my home office, listening to their laughter drift through the walls. The house felt like a museum where I was both the curator and the exhibit nobody wanted to see. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Pete Morrison, my best friend since college, noticed the change immediately. Pete's an ex-cop turned private investigator, the kind of guy who can spot trouble from 3 blocks away. When I met him for drinks at Murphy's Pub, our usual Thursday ritual, he took one look at my face and ordered whiskey instead of beer. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said, sliding the glass across the scarred wooden table. "Worse," I replied. "Someone stole my family." I told him about the month of silence, about feeling invisible in my own home. Pete listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. "So, what are you going to do about it?" he asked. "What can I do? I can't force someone to talk to me." "No, but you can figure out why they stopped." That's when Pete suggested I start paying attention to the details I'd been ignoring. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way Andrea's friends, Jess and Lauren, would stop talking when I entered a room, the expensive gifts that appeared without explanation, the new lingerie I never saw her wear. "Open your eyes, Neil," Pete said. "The writing's on the wall. You just need to read it." So I started reading. I began noticing things. How Andrea would disappear into the bathroom with her phone for 20-minute calls. How she'd suddenly developed an interest in working late on Fridays. How Chloe would look guilty whenever I asked about her mother's whereabouts. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. I was doing laundry, a chore that had somehow become mine during the month of silence, when I found them. Cufflinks in the pocket of Andrea's blazer, expensive ones, gold with mother-of-pearl inlays, engraved with the initials MF. I stood in our laundry room, holding another man's jewelry, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. My wife was having an affair, and she was so confident in my invisibility that she didn't even bother hiding the evidence. Mark Feldman, Pumper, the man who called our house at midnight about urgent briefs, the man who sent my wife flowers on Administrative Professionals Day, even though she wasn't his secretary, the man who looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe whenever we met at company functions. I pocketed the cufflinks and finished the laundry. That evening, I tried one more time to bridge the gap. "Andrea," I said as she sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, "we need to talk." She looked up, and for a moment, I thought the spell was broken. Then she glanced at her phone, gathered her things, and walked upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close, followed by the distinctive click of the lock. That night, I slept on the couch in my office and made a decision. If I was invisible, I might as well embrace it. Ghosts, after all, can go anywhere and see everything. And sometimes they get their revenge. The next morning, I started planning my disappearance. The end came at Chloe's engagement party, though I didn't know it would be the end when I walked into the Marriott ballroom that Saturday evening. I'd been looking forward to it. My daughter's happiness was one of the few bright spots in my increasingly dark world. Chloe was marrying David Chen, a nice kid from her law school class. They'd been together for 2 years, and despite everything else falling apart in my life, I was genuinely happy for them. David treated her well, made her laugh, and most importantly, he actually acknowledged my existence. The party was Andrea's production, naturally. She'd spent weeks planning it, coordinating with Chloe on everything from the flower arrangements to the catering. I wasn't consulted, of course, but I was expected to attend and smile and play the role of proud father. I arrived fashionably on time, wearing my best suit and a smile that felt painted on. The ballroom was packed with Chloe's friends, colleagues from Andrea's firm, and various family members. I spotted my mother-in-law, Mrs. Hayes, holding court near the bar. She'd never liked me, considering me beneath her daughter's station, and the month of silence had apparently confirmed her suspicions about my inadequacy. "Neil," she said when I approached, her voice carrying the warmth of a January morning. "How nice of you to make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. "Where's the happy couple?" She gestured toward the far side of the room, where Chloe was showing off her ring to a group of squealing friends. David stood beside her, looking slightly overwhelmed but happy. I started toward them, but Mrs. Hayes caught my arm. "Perhaps you should wait," she suggested. "They're having a moment." I looked closer and realized what she meant. Andrea was there, standing close to Mark Feldman, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. As I watched, Mark's hand briefly touched the small of her back, a gesture so casual and proprietary that it made my stomach clench. "Ah," I said. "I see." Mrs. Hayes studied my face with the interest of a scientist observing a specimen. "Do you?" she asked. Before I could respond, Pete appeared at my elbow. He'd cleaned up nicely for the occasion, trading his usual jeans for a dark suit that made him look almost respectable. "Evening, Mrs. Hayes," he said with a charming smile. "Mind if I borrow Neil for a minute?" She waved us away dismissively, already turning her attention to someone more interesting. Pete steered me toward the bar, where he ordered 2 whiskeys without asking what I wanted. "You look like you're about to explode," he observed. "I'm fine." "Right, and I'm the Pope." He handed me the whiskey. "What happened?" I nodded toward where Andrea and Mark were still deep in conversation. As we watched, Mark leaned closer and whispered something in her ear. She laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh I hadn't heard in months. "They're not even trying to hide it," I said. "Why should they? You're invisible, remember?" The words stung because they were true. I was the ghost at my own daughter's engagement party, watching my wife flirt openly with her lover while our friends and family pretended not to notice. That's when Jess and Lauren appeared, Andrea's closest friends and biggest enablers. Jess worked at the same law firm, a sharp-tongued gossip who thrived on drama. Lauren was a real estate agent with a talent for saying cruel things with a sweet smile. "Neil!" Jess exclaimed, as if she was surprised to see me at my own daughter's party. "How are you holding up?" "Just fine," I replied. "Why wouldn't I be?" Lauren exchanged a look with Jess. "Oh, no reason. It's just, well, everyone's been talking." "About what?" "About how you've been struggling lately," Jess said, her voice dripping with false concern. "The pressure at work, the drinking, the mood swings." I stared at her. "What mood swings?" "Andrea's been so worried about you," Lauren added. "She says you've been paranoid, accusing her of things. It's so sad when men reach a certain age and start unraveling." The whiskey turned to acid in my stomach. They were laying groundwork, I realized, creating a narrative where I was the unstable one, the problem that needed to be managed or eliminated. It was brilliant, really. By the time Andrea made her move, whatever that move turned out to be, everyone would already believe I was the villain of the story. "Excuse me," I said, and walked away before I said something I'd regret. I found refuge near the windows overlooking the hotel's garden. The autumn evening was crisp, and I could see couples strolling the lit pathways below. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the weight of betrayal and humiliation. "Dad?" I turned to find Chloe approaching, beautiful in a midnight blue dress that made her look older than her 22 years. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe she'd come to bridge the gap, to be the peacemaker she'd always been. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "Wonderful party. You look stunning." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks. Listen, Dad, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "Are you okay? Really okay? She's been worried about you." There it was, the narrative spreading like a virus through my own family. I looked at my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful daughter who was supposed to be on my side, and saw doubt in her eyes. "What has she told you?" I asked. "Just that you've been acting strange lately. Paranoid. She found some weird stuff on your computer, searches about surveillance and private investigators. She thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown." I almost laughed. Andrea had found my research because she'd been checking my browser history. The irony was perfect. "Chloe," I said carefully, "what if I told you that your mother—" "Don't." She held up a hand. "Please don't put me in the middle of this. Whatever's happening between you two, work it out. But don't make me choose sides." She was already walking away before I could respond, leaving me alone by the windows with the taste of betrayal sharp on my tongue. That's when I saw them. Andrea and Mark had moved to a quiet corner near the coat check. They thought they were hidden, but from my angle by the windows, I had a clear view. Mark had his hands on her waist, pulling her close. She was looking up at him with an expression I remembered from our early days together. Adoration, mixed with desire. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a quick peck or an accidental brush of lips. It was a deep, passionate embrace between two people who'd clearly done this many times before. Her hand came up to cup his cheek, her body molding against his with practiced familiarity. I stood there, watching my wife of 18 years make out with another man at our daughter's engagement party, and something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a rubber band stretched too far, releasing all its stored energy at once. I walked over to them. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice my approach until I cleared my throat. Andrea jerked away from Mark like she'd been electrocuted, her face flushing crimson. Mark, to his credit, didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed at being interrupted. "Neil," Andrea said, her voice breathless. We were just what?" I asked conversationally. "Just making sure there wasn't any lipstick on his teeth? Just checking his tonsils for irregularities? Just practicing CPR?" Mark stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster. "Now look here, Carter." "No, you look here, Pumper," I said, using his ridiculous nickname with all the contempt I could muster. "This is my daughter's engagement party. My daughter, my family, my event. You're a guest here, and you're groping the host's wife. That's what we call poor form." "Neil, please," Andrea hissed, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid someone might notice? Bit late for that, don't you think?" Mark's face was turning red. "You need to calm down, buddy. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. "That's rich, coming from the man who just had his tongue down my wife's throat." "That's enough," Andrea snapped. "You're drunk." "Actually, I'm remarkably sober. Probably the most sober I've been in months." I looked between them, these two people who'd been systematically destroying my life while pretending to care about my well-being. "So how long has this been going on?" "Nothing's going on," Andrea said automatically. "Right. And I suppose those cufflinks in your blazer pocket just materialized there through spontaneous generation." The color drained from her face. Mark's eyes narrowed. "You've been going through her things?" he demanded. "That's stalking behavior, pal. That's grounds for a restraining order." "Is it? Well then, I suppose having an affair is grounds for divorce." The word hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. Andrea's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Mark took another step forward, and for a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. "Trust me, Neil. You really don't want to go down this road." "Why? Because you'll ruin me? Because you'll use your connections to destroy my career? Because you'll turn my daughter against me?" I smiled, and it felt like shards of glass. "Newsflash, Pumper. You've already done all that. What else you got?" That's when Pete appeared, seemingly from nowhere. He positioned himself slightly behind Mark, close enough to intervene if things got physical. "Everything okay here?" he asked pleasantly. Mark glanced over his shoulder, taking in Pete's size and bearing. Some instinct, maybe the same one that had kept him alive during his wrestling days, told him this wasn't a fight he wanted. "We're fine," he said, stepping back. "Just a misunderstanding." "I'll bet." Pete's smile was friendly, but his eyes were cold. Maybe it's time to rejoin the party. Mark looked like he wanted to argue, but Andrea grabbed his arm. "Come on," she said. "Let's go." They walked away together, and I watched them go with a strange sense of detachment. The marriage was over. Had been over for months, probably. The only question now was how ugly the ending would be. "Well," Pete said, That went better than expected. Did it? You didn't hit him. He didn't hit you. Nobody called the police. I'd call that a win. I looked around the ballroom at the party continuing obliviously around us. Chloe was laughing with David near the cake table. Mrs. Hayes was lecturing someone about proper etiquette. Jess and Lauren were whispering in a corner, no doubt spreading their poison to anyone who'd listen. I need to get out of here, I said. Good idea. Want some company? No, I need to think. Pete nodded. Call me when you're ready to stop thinking and start acting. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. In the hotel parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the lights of the city spread out below. Somewhere in those lights was my house, my life, my future. But sitting there in the darkness, I couldn't quite remember why any of it mattered. That night, I went home and packed a single duffel bag. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Since I don't exist, consider this my ghost story. Then I walked out of the house I'd lived in for 15 years and didn't look back. But before I left, I made one small gesture of defiance. Mark's Mercedes was parked in our driveway. Apparently, he'd decided to make himself at home. I walked over to it with a tube of super glue I'd grabbed from my workshop. The door locks were easy. A few drops in each keyhole, and Pumper would need a locksmith to get into his precious car. But that seemed insufficient for the magnitude of his offense. So I opened the hood, he'd left it unlocked, the arrogant fool, and located the air conditioning intake. The fish sauce was from our refrigerator, a bottle Andrea had bought for some Asian fusion recipe she'd never made. I poured the entire contents into the AC system, imagining Mark's face when he turned on the air the next morning. Finally, I left a business card under his windshield wiper. It was one of mine, from my architecture firm, but I'd written a message on the back. You're welcome. The ghost. Then I drove away into the night, leaving my old life behind like a snake shedding its skin. The war was about to begin. 6 months later, I was a different man. Not metaphorically, literally. I'd lost 20 pounds, traded my conservative suits for sharp Italian cuts, and developed the kind of lean, hungry look that comes from having nothing left to lose. My hair was shorter, my jaw was sharper, and my eyes had acquired a predatory gleam that made people step aside when I walked down the street. I was also successful in ways I'd never been before. Carter and Associates Architecture occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the South End, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. The office was sleek and modern, all clean lines and expensive furniture that whispered rather than shouted about success. I'd founded the firm 3 months after leaving Andrea, using my savings and a loan secured against my half of the house, a house I'd legally abandoned but still technically owned. The first client had been a tech startup looking for office space. The second had been a restaurant chain expanding into New England. By month 4, I was turning down projects. The secret was simple. I'd stopped playing by the rules. For 18 years, I'd been the good husband, the reliable employee, the man who colored inside the lines. I'd deferred to Andrea's ambitions, accepted modest raises without complaint, and built a reputation as someone who delivered solid, uninspired work on time and under budget. Now I was someone else entirely. The Pemberton project is moving forward, said Jessica Walsh, my new business partner and the smartest person I'd ever met. She was 35, a former associate at a top architectural firm who'd left to start her own consultancy. When I'd approached her about joining forces, she'd been intrigued by my sudden transformation from mild-mannered suburban architect to aggressive entrepreneur. Any pushback from the city? I asked. Some, but your friend at the planning commission smoothed things over. My friend was actually Pete's contact, a former cop who'd moved into municipal politics and owed Pete a favor. It was amazing how many doors opened when you stopped being polite and started being strategic. Good. What about the Henderson project? Jessica's smile was sharp as a blade. That's the interesting one. Mark Feldman called this morning, wanted to discuss their space requirements. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the irony. Henderson and Associates, Andrea's law firm, was expanding, and they needed new offices. Somehow my name had come up as a potential architect. The same Mark Feldman who'd been groping my wife 6 months ago was now asking for my professional services. What did you tell him? That we'd be happy to submit a proposal. I scheduled a meeting for Thursday. Perfect. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock at Henderson and Associates' current offices, a stuffy suite in a downtown high-rise that reeked of old money and older leather. I arrived precisely on time, dressed in a charcoal suit that had cost more than I used to spend on clothes in 6 months. The receptionist, a young woman who clearly hadn't been briefed on the office politics, smiled brightly when I introduced myself. Mr. Carter, Mr. Feldman is expecting you. Right this way. She led me down a hallway lined with portraits of distinguished-looking lawyers, all of whom seemed to be frowning at me with disapproval. At the end of the hall was a corner office with Mark Feldman's name on the door. He was on the phone when I entered, gesturing for me to sit while he finished his conversation. I took the opportunity to study him. 6 months had not been kind to Pumper. His hair was thinner, his face was puffy, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested too many late nights and too much stress. "Sorry about that," he said, hanging up the phone. "Client emergency." "No problem," I replied pleasantly. "I appreciate you considering Carter and Associates for your expansion project." "Yes, well, your reputation precedes you. I hear you've been making quite a name for yourself." "Business is good." "I'm sure it is." He leaned back in his chair, trying to project confidence, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "I have to ask, Neil, this isn't going to be awkward, is it, given the circumstances?" "What circumstances would those be?" He blinked. "You know, the situation with Andrea." "You mean my divorce? Why would that be awkward? These things happen." The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Andrea had tried to fight it, claiming I'd abandoned the marriage without cause. But Pete had provided evidence of the affair that made her position untenable. She'd walked away with half the house value and her retirement accounts. I'd kept my business and my dignity. "Right," Mark said uncertainly. "Of course. Well then, let's talk about the project." For the next hour, we discussed square footage, timelines, and budget requirements. I was professional, knowledgeable, and completely uninterested in relitigating the past. By the end of the meeting, Mark seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't tried to strangle him. "We'll have a proposal to you by Friday," I said, standing to leave. "Excellent. I look forward to reviewing it." I was halfway to the door when I turned back. "Oh, one more thing. How's your Mercedes running? Any problems with the air conditioning?" His face went pale. "How did you—" "Just curious. I remember you mentioning some trouble with it at Chloe's engagement party." I left him sitting there, mouth agape, and walked out of the office with a spring in my step. Round 1 to the ghost. The proposal I submitted was a masterpiece of professional competence and subtle malice. The design was brilliant, exactly what Henderson and Associates needed to project success and attract high-end clients. The timeline was aggressive but achievable, and the budget was competitive enough to make them the front-runner for the project. There was just one small catch buried in the fine print, a clause requiring all change orders to be approved by the principal architect, namely me. It was standard language that most clients never noticed, but it gave me unprecedented control over the project's execution. Mark called the following Tuesday to accept the proposal. "Congratulations," Jessica said when I hung up the phone. "You just landed the biggest project in the firm's history." "It's not about the money," I replied. "What's it about?" I smiled. "Revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes you need to cook it slowly to get the flavor just right." The project officially began 3 weeks later with a groundbreaking ceremony that was attended by most of Boston's legal community. I arrived in my new BMW, a sleek black sedan that announced success without being ostentatious, and made my way through the crowd of lawyers, judges, and politicians. Andrea was there, of course, looking stunning in a navy dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. She was chatting with a group of associates, playing the role of successful professional woman with practiced ease. When she saw me approaching, her smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Neil," she said coolly, "how nice to see you." "Andrea, you look well." "Thank you. I hear congratulations are in order. Landing the Henderson project is quite a coup." "I had a good proposal." "I'm sure you did." She glanced around, making sure we weren't being overheard. "I hope this won't be complicated." "Why would it be complicated? We're both professionals." "Of course, it's just—" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Mark mentioned you seemed different during your meeting. More intense." I laughed. 6 months of freedom will do that to a man. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not being ignored. Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You spent a month pretending I didn't exist, then another year having an affair with your boss. I think fair went out the window a long time ago." "I never meant for things to happen the way they did." "Of course not. These things just happen, right? Like gravity or the weather." Before she could respond, Mark appeared at her elbow, looking uncomfortable but determined to assert his authority. "Neil," he said with forced heartiness. "Great turnout, isn't it?" "Outstanding. Nothing like a good groundbreaking to bring the community together." "Indeed. I wanted to thank you again for taking on this project. I know it might be awkward, given everything that's happened." "Not at all," I replied. "Business is business. Personal feelings have nothing to do with it." Good. That's very professional of you." I smiled. Oh, I'm nothing if not professional. You'll find that out soon enough. The construction phase began 2 weeks later, and that's when the fun really started. Every building project encounters unexpected problems, soil conditions, utility conflicts, weather delays. It's the architect's job to solve these problems quickly and efficiently, minimizing cost and schedule impact. Unless, of course, the architect has other priorities. The first problem arose when the excavation crew discovered an unmarked utility line that wasn't on the city's records. It was actually a defunct telephone cable that had been abandoned for decades, but it required investigation and approval from 3 different city departments before work could continue. The delay cost Henderson and Associates 2 weeks and $20,000 in extended equipment rental. These things happen, I explained to Mark during our weekly progress meeting. Old buildings, old infrastructure. You never know what you're going to find underground. The second problem was a discrepancy in the structural drawings that required the steel contractor to modify several beam connections. The modification was technically unnecessary. The original design would have worked fine, but the building code was ambiguous enough to justify the change. Another week, another $15,000. By month 3, the project was 6 weeks behind schedule and $100,000 over budget. Mark was getting pressure from his partners, who were starting to question the wisdom of hiring his ex-wife's ex-husband as their architect. "This is getting ridiculous," he said during one particularly heated meeting. "Every week there's a new problem, a new delay, a new cost overrun." "Construction is unpredictable," I replied calmly. "That's why smart clients build contingencies into their budgets." "We did build in contingencies. You've blown through them already." "Then maybe you should have built in bigger contingencies." His face was turning red. "Are you doing this on purpose?" I looked shocked. "Doing what on purpose? My job? Following the building code? Ensuring the safety and integrity of your new offices? You know what I mean? Actually, I don't. Are you suggesting that I'm somehow sabotaging this project? Because that would be a very serious accusation. The kind of accusation that could result in a lawsuit." He backed down, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. The problem was, he couldn't prove anything. Every delay was legitimate, every cost overrun was justified, every problem was documented and approved by the appropriate authorities. I was playing by the rules, just not the rules he expected. The real masterstroke came in month 4, when I discovered a conflict between the mechanical and electrical systems that required a complete redesign of the building's top floor. The floor that housed the executive offices, including Mark's corner suite. "This is unacceptable," he said when I presented the revised drawings. "You're talking about another 2-month delay." "I understand your frustration, but this is a safety issue. The electrical load calculations show that the original design would overload the building's capacity. We could have a fire hazard." "Then why didn't you catch this earlier?" "Because the mechanical engineer provided revised equipment specifications after we'd already submitted for permits. These things happen when you're dealing with cutting-edge HVAC systems." It was technically true, though I'd been the one who'd suggested the cutting-edge system in the first place, knowing it would create conflicts down the line. Mark stared at the drawings, his jaw working silently. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to escape the trap I'd built around him. "How much?" he asked finally. "For the redesign? Another $150,000 plus the time delay? That's extortion. That's construction." I gathered up the drawings and stood to leave. "Of course, if you'd prefer to find another architect—" "No," he said quickly. "No, we're too far into this to start over." "I thought you might feel that way." As I walked out of his office, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. He knew what I was doing, but he couldn't prove it. More importantly, he couldn't stop it. The ghost was having his revenge, one delay at a time. The annual Boston Legal Excellence Awards Gala was the social event of the year for the city's legal community. Held at the Four Seasons, it was an evening of networking, speech-making, and barely concealed professional jealousy, all wrapped in black-tie elegance. I hadn't attended in years. As the spouse of a mid-level law firm manager, I'd never warranted an invitation. But times had changed. Carter & Associates was now designing offices for 3 of the city's top firms, and success had a way of opening doors that had previously been locked. I arrived fashionably late, stepping out of my BMW in a custom tuxedo that had cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The valet took my keys with the deference reserved for obviously successful people, and I walked into the hotel lobby with the confidence of a man who belonged there. The ballroom was packed with Boston's legal elite, all of them dressed in their finest and working the room with practiced efficiency. I spotted several familiar faces, judges I'd met through various projects, lawyers who'd become clients, politicians who owed Pete favors. And there, near the bar, stood Andrea and Mark. They made a striking couple, I had to admit. Andrea was wearing a silver gown that showcased her figure, while Mark had clearly invested in a better tuxedo than his usual rental. They were holding court with a group of associates, laughing at Mark's jokes and hanging on his every word. I watched them for a moment, remembering the man I'd been 6 months ago. Invisible, ignored, dismissed. That man would have slunk away, found a corner to hide in, maybe left early with a convenient headache. But that man was gone. I walked straight toward them. "Andrea," I said pleasantly. "Mark. What a lovely evening." The group turned toward me, and I saw recognition flicker across several faces. Word of my transformation had apparently spread through the legal community's gossip network. "Neil," Andrea said, her voice carefully neutral, "I didn't know you'd be here. Wouldn't miss it. The legal community has been so good to me lately." Mark's jaw tightened. "Yes, we heard about your expansion." "Business is booming," I confirmed. "In fact, I just signed 3 new projects this week. Amazing how word of mouth works in this town." It was true. The Henderson project, despite its delays and cost overruns, was becoming a showcase for my firm's capabilities. Other law firms were taking notice, drawn by the innovative design and impressed by the attention to detail, even if they didn't know about the strategic complications I'd built into the timeline. "That's wonderful," said one of the associates, a young woman I didn't recognize. "What kind of projects?" "Office buildings, mostly. Law firms seem to be expanding all over the city." I smiled at Mark. "Speaking of which, how's your project coming along? Still on schedule?" His face darkened. "We've encountered some unexpected challenges." "Construction is so unpredictable," I agreed, "but I'm sure everything will work out, eventually." Before Mark could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "Neil Carter? Is that really you?" I turned to see Thomas Henderson himself, the founding partner of Henderson and Associates and one of the most powerful lawyers in Boston. He was in his 70s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that made other people step aside when he entered a room. "Mr. Henderson," I said, extending my hand. "Good to see you." "Remarkable transformation," he said, looking me up and down appraisingly. "Mark's told me about your work on our new building. Impressive stuff." "Thank you. It's an exciting project." "Indeed. Though I understand there have been some complications?" I could feel Mark tensing beside me. "Nothing unusual," I said. "Old building, old infrastructure. We're working through the challenges. I'm sure you are." Henderson's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Mark, why don't you get me a drink? Scotch neat?" It was clearly a dismissal, and Mark had no choice but to comply. As he walked away, Henderson leaned closer to me. "He's not happy with you," he observed. I gathered that. Should I be concerned? About the project? Not at all. It's going to be everything you hoped for and more. And about Mark? I met his gaze steadily. That depends on what you're asking. Henderson chuckled. "I've been practicing law for 50 years, son. I know when there's history between people. The question is whether that history is going to interfere with my building." "The building will be completed on time and on budget," I said. "Eventually." "Eventually?" "Construction is unpredictable," I repeated, "but quality work takes time." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "See that it is. Quality work, I mean. I don't care about the rest of it." Mark returned with the scotch, and Henderson moved on to work the rest of the room. I was left standing with Andrea and Mark, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "What did he want?" Mark asked. "Just checking on the project." He seemed satisfied. "You're playing a dangerous game," Andrea said quietly. "Am I? I thought I was just doing my job." "You know what you're doing," Mark said. "And when this is over—" "When this is over," I interrupted, "you'll have a beautiful new building, and I'll have another satisfied client. Everyone wins. Except you're costing us a fortune. I'm following the building code and ensuring quality construction. If that's expensive, maybe you should have hired a cheaper architect." Mark took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me, but we were surrounded by his colleagues and clients, and making a scene would only hurt his reputation. "Gentlemen," Andrea said quickly, "perhaps we should—" She was interrupted by the sound of feedback from the podium, where the evening's master of ceremonies was calling for attention. The awards ceremony was beginning. I excused myself and found a table near the back of the room, where I could observe without being observed. The awards themselves were predictably boring, lawyer after lawyer being recognized for various achievements in corporate law, litigation, and public service. But I wasn't watching the stage. I was watching Andrea and Mark. They were seated at a table near the front, playing the role of successful couple with practiced ease, but I could see the tension in their body language, the way Mark's jaw stayed clenched throughout the evening, the way Andrea kept glancing toward my table. The real entertainment came during the networking reception that followed the ceremony. I was standing near the windows, enjoying a glass of champagne and the view of Boston Harbor, when Jess and Lauren approached. Andrea's loyal friends had aged visibly in the past 6 months. The stress of choosing sides in the divorce had taken its toll, and they both looked like women who'd been living on gossip and spite for too long. "Well, well," Jess said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Look what the cat dragged in." "Ladies," I replied pleasantly, "you both look tired." Lauren's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We heard about your little business venture. How exciting for you." "Thank you. It's been quite successful." "For now," Jess added. "But these things have a way of catching up with you, don't they?" "Do they? I hadn't noticed." "Oh, they do," Lauren assured me, "especially when you're playing games with people who have more power than you do." I sipped my champagne, considering my response. These two had been instrumental in spreading the narrative about my supposed instability during the divorce. They'd whispered poison in ears all over the city, painting me as the unstable husband who'd abandoned his family. Time to return the favor. "Speaking of games," I said conversationally, "how's your husband, Lauren? Still traveling so much for work?" Her face went pale. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. It's just that Pete mentioned seeing him at that hotel bar in Cambridge last week. The one near MIT. He was with a very attractive young woman. Probably a business meeting." It wasn't true. Pete had never mentioned any such thing. But Lauren's reaction told me I'd hit close to home. Her marriage had been rocky for years, and the guilt was written all over her face. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" "Well, I suppose that's between you and him." I turned to Jess. "And how's the job search going? I heard Henderson's been making some staff cuts." Jess's mouth fell open. "How did you—" "Word gets around, especially when you're working with the firm's biggest client." I smiled pleasantly. "Don't worry, I'm sure something will turn up. There's always demand for experienced— What is it you do again?" Both women looked like they'd been slapped. They mumbled some excuse and hurried away, leaving me alone by the windows once again. But not for long. "That was cruel," Andrea said, appearing at my elbow. "Was it? I thought it was just conversation." "You know Lauren's marriage is in trouble, and Jess is terrified about losing her job." "Then maybe they shouldn't have spent the last 6 months spreading lies about me." She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the harbor. "Is that what this is all about? Revenge?" "This is about consequences," I said. "For months you and your friends treated me like I was invisible. You made me feel worthless, irrelevant, like I didn't matter. Well, now I matter, and you're discovering that invisible men see everything." "I never meant—" "Yes, you did. You meant every bit of it. The silence, the affair, the humiliation. You wanted me gone, and you got your wish. The only problem is that you thought I'd disappear quietly." She turned to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Fear. "What do you want, Neil?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to be dismissed, ignored, and humiliated. I want you to know what it's like when the ground shifts under your feet, and everything you thought was solid turns out to be built on sand." "And Mark?" "Mark is collateral damage. He chose to involve himself in my marriage, so he gets to live with the consequences." "This has to stop," she said. "You're hurting innocent people." "Innocent?" I laughed. "Like you were innocent when you were having an affair? Like Mark was innocent when he was groping you at our daughter's engagement party?" "That's different." "Is it? How?" She didn't have an answer for that. I finished my champagne and set the glass on a nearby table. "Enjoy the rest of the evening, Andrea, and give my regards to Mark. Tell him I'm looking forward to our progress meeting next week." As I walked away, I could feel her watching me. The ghost had become flesh and bone, and he was hungry for more. The war was just getting started. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, just as I was reviewing the latest delay reports from the Henderson project. My assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Mr. Carter, there's a David Chen on line 2. Says he's your son-in-law." I picked up the phone, curious. David and I had maintained a cordial relationship since the divorce, but he rarely called the office. "David, everything okay?" "Hey, Neil, sorry to bother you at work, but I need to talk to you. It's about Chloe." My stomach clenched. "What's wrong? Is she hurt?" No, nothing like that. But she's really struggling with everything that's been happening. The divorce, the tension between you and her mom, the stuff with Mark. She's caught in the middle and it's tearing her apart. I leaned back in my chair, guilt washing over me. In my single-minded pursuit of revenge, I'd lost sight of the collateral damage to my daughter. What can I do? Talk to her, please. She misses you, but she's afraid to reach out because she thinks you blame her for taking Andrea's side. I don't blame her for anything. I know that, and deep down she knows it too, but she needs to hear it from you. We arranged to meet for dinner that evening at a quiet restaurant in Cambridge, away from the Boston legal community's prying eyes. I arrived early and was nursing a beer when Chloe walked in. She looked tired, older than her 23 years. The bright, confident young woman from her engagement party had been replaced by someone who carried the weight of her parents' war on her shoulders. "Hi, Dad," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Hi, sweetheart. You look beautiful." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look good, too. Different, but good." We ordered dinner and made small talk for a while. Her job at a downtown firm, David's work, their plans for the summer. But I could see the tension building, the words she wanted to say but didn't know how to voice. Finally, I decided to make it easy for her. "David says you're struggling with everything that's happened." She looked down at her plate. "It's just hard. You and Mom used to be this unit, you know? Even when you fought, you were still my parents. Now it's like you're enemies." "We're not enemies, Chloe. We're just done." "But it feels like more than that. The way you look at each other, the things people are saying about the Henderson Project, it's like you hate her." I chose my words carefully. "I don't hate your mother, but I don't like who she became, and I don't like how she treated me. She says you've changed, that you're not the man she married. She's right. I'm not that man anymore. That man was a pushover who let people walk all over him. That man pretended everything was fine when his wife was having an affair." Chloe winced. "Did you have to say it like that? Would you prefer I sugarcoat it? Your mother had an affair with her boss for months, while I was living in the same house, eating dinner alone, wondering what I'd done wrong. I know, and I'm sorry. But the way you're handling it, how should I handle it, Chloe? Should I just pretend it never happened? Should I smile and nod when I see them together? Should I make their lives easier by disappearing quietly? No, but your mother made choices. Mark made choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. That's how the adult world works." She was quiet for a long moment, picking at her salad. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "I just want my dad back," she whispered. The words hit me like a physical blow. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. But you're different, harder. Sometimes when I look at you, I don't recognize the man who used to read me bedtime stories." "That man was weak," I said. "He let people take advantage of him. He accepted scraps and called it a feast. Would you really want him back?" "I want the parts of him that loved me unconditionally, the parts that put family first. I do love you unconditionally. That will never change. Then stop this war with Mom, please, for me." I studied my daughter's face, seeing the pain I'd helped cause. For a moment, I wavered. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to let go of the anger and move on. Then I remembered the month of silence, the cufflinks in Andrea's pocket, the kiss at the engagement party, the lies and manipulation and systematic destruction of my self-worth. "I can't do that, Chloe. Not yet." She pulled her hand away. "Why not?" "Because it's not finished." "What's not finished? The divorce is final. You have your own business. You're successful and happy. What more do you want?" "I want them to understand what they did. I want them to feel what I felt." "And then what? Will that bring back the last 2 years of our family?" "No, but it might prevent them from doing it to someone else." She shook her head. "You're not doing this for some greater good, Dad. You're doing it because you're angry." "You're right. I am angry. And I have every right to be." "But you don't have the right to drag me through it." The words hung between us like a challenge. I could see the choice forming in her eyes, the same choice she'd faced at the engagement party, the same choice that had led her to side with her mother. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you can't let this go, then I can't be part of it. I won't choose between my parents again." "You're not choosing between us. You're asking me to surrender to the people who wronged me. I'm asking you to be the bigger person. I tried being the bigger person for 18 years. It got me a month of silence and a wife who was having an affair." Chloe stood up, her face set with determination. "Then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about." She walked out of the restaurant, leaving me alone with the wreckage of another relationship. I sat there for a long time, staring at her untouched dinner and wondering if revenge was worth losing my daughter. But by the time I got home, the doubt had hardened back into resolve. Chloe would understand eventually. When she was older, when she'd experienced real betrayal herself, she'd realized that some things couldn't be forgiven or forgotten. The war would continue. 2 weeks later, I got a call that changed everything. "Neil, it's Tom Henderson. Can you come to my office? There's something we need to discuss." I arrived at Henderson & Associates an hour later, curious about the urgency in his voice. The receptionist led me directly to his office, where I found him sitting behind his massive desk with a file folder in front of him. "Tom," I said, settling into the chair across from him, "what can I do for you?" "It's what I can do for you," he replied, "or rather, what I can tell you." He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, an old college yearbook photo of Andrea from her senior year at Boston University. She looked young and fresh-faced, nothing like the polished professional she'd become. "Recognize her?" he asked. "Of course, that's Andrea." Andrea Hayes, class of 1998, graduated magna cum laude with a degree in business administration. "Right. So?" Henderson pulled out another document, what looked like a newspaper clipping from the BU student paper. "Did she ever tell you about her senior year internship?" "She worked at a consulting firm downtown, nothing special." "Actually, she worked at Hayes & Associates, her father's firm." I frowned. Her father was an accountant, not a consultant. Her father was a lot of things, including a man who liked to bend the rules when it came to his clients' finances. Henderson slid the newspaper clipping across the desk. The headline read, "BU student questioned in father's embezzlement scandal." I stared at the article, the words swimming before my eyes. According to the report, Robert Hayes had been stealing from his clients for years, using his daughter's student status to hide assets and transfer funds. Andrea had been questioned by police but never charged, claiming she was unaware of her father's activities. "This is," I started, then stopped. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because it's relevant to our current situation." "How?" Henderson leaned forward. "Because 3 months ago, Mark Feldman tried to use this information to blackmail me." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What?" "He came to me with this file, claimed he'd discovered it during a background check on you, said it proved that Andrea was involved in financial crimes and that by association you might be as well. He suggested that hiring you as our architect was a liability the firm couldn't afford." "That's insane. Even if this is true, it has nothing to do with me or my work." "Of course it doesn't, which is why I told him to go to hell." I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was hearing. "Why would he do this?" "Because you've been making his life miserable for the past 6 months, and he wanted me to fire you." "And you didn't?" Henderson smiled grimly. "Son, I've been practicing law for 50 years. I know blackmail when I see it, and I know quality work when I see it. Your building is going to be magnificent, delays and all." "So why are you telling me this now?" "Because Mark's getting desperate. The project delays have put him in a bad position with the other partners. His affair with your ex-wife is common knowledge around the office, and it's affecting his credibility. He's looking for a way to shift blame onto someone else. Onto me. Onto you. And he's not above using dirty tactics to do it." I looked at the photograph of young Andrea again, seeing her with new eyes. How many other secrets had she kept from me during our marriage? How many other lies had I accepted without question? "What do you want me to do with this information?" I asked. "Whatever you think is appropriate, but be careful. Desperate people do desperate things, and Mark Feldman is running out of options." I left Henderson's office with the file tucked under my arm, my mind racing. The old Neil would have agonized over the moral implications of using this information. He would have worried about fairness and proportionality and taking the high road. But the old Neil was gone, and the new Neil had learned that sometimes the high road led nowhere. It was time to end this war once and for all. The Boston Architecture and Design Expo was the industry event of the year, a 3-day showcase where the city's top firms displayed their latest projects and competed for prestige and clients. I'd never exhibited before. My old firm hadn't been significant enough to warrant booth space, but Carter & Associates was different. Our display occupied a prime corner spot, featuring scale models and renderings of our recent projects, including the Henderson building. Despite the delays and cost overruns, the design was undeniably impressive, and it was drawing significant attention from potential clients. I was discussing a potential project with a developer when I spotted them across the exhibition hall. Andrea and Mark were working the crowd together, playing the role of successful power couple with practiced ease. Mark was schmoozing with potential clients, while Andrea charmed their wives and assistants. They looked confident, untouchable. That was about to change. "Excuse me," I said to the developer. I'll be right back. I walked over to where Pete was manning our booth, looking uncomfortable in his suit, but doing his best to play the role of business development consultant. They're here, I said. I see them. You ready for this? More than ready. Pete nodded toward a group of journalists near the main stage. The press conference starts in 20 minutes. You sure about the timing? Perfect timing. Maximum audience. Maximum impact. The press conference was supposed to be a routine industry update. New projects, market trends, regulatory changes, but I'd arranged for a few additional topics to be discussed. As the crowd gathered around the main stage, I made my way to the front, positioning myself where Andrea and Mark would be sure to see me. They were standing near the back, whispering to each other and occasionally glancing in my direction. The moderator, a journalist from the Boston Business Journal, began with the standard questions about market conditions and upcoming projects. Several prominent architects took turns at the microphone, discussing their latest commissions and future plans. Then it was my turn. Neil Carter from Carter & Associates, I said, stepping up to the microphone. I'd like to address some recent concerns about project management and professional ethics in our industry. I saw Mark stiffen in the crowd. Andrea grabbed his arm, her face pale. As many of you know, we're currently working on the new Henderson & Associates building, a project that's faced some unexpected challenges. I think it's important to discuss how personal relationships can sometimes complicate professional obligations. The audience was paying attention now, sensing drama. Journalists were pulling out recording devices and cameras. For example, I continued, what happens when a client tries to use personal information to influence business decisions? What happens when professional disagreements become personal vendettas? Mark was pushing through the crowd now, trying to reach the stage, but Pete had positioned himself strategically, along with a few other allies, creating a human barrier. 3 months ago, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the hall's sound system, a client attempted to blackmail my firm's biggest customer using fabricated allegations about my personal life. When that failed, the same individual began spreading rumors about my professional competence and mental stability. That's enough, Mark shouted from the crowd. This is inappropriate. Is it? I asked, turning toward him with a smile. I think the public has a right to know when business relationships are compromised by personal agendas. I pulled out the file Henderson had given me, holding it up for everyone to see. This is a police report from 1998, documenting an embezzlement investigation involving Hayes & Associates, a Boston area accounting firm. The investigation centered on Robert Hayes, who was stealing from clients to fund his lifestyle. Also questioned was his daughter, Andrea Hayes, now known as Andrea Carter, who worked as an intern at the firm. The crowd erupted in murmurs and gasps. Cameras were flashing, journalists were scribbling notes, and I could see several people pulling out their phones to record. Now, Mrs. Carter was never charged with any crime, I continued, and I'm not suggesting she was involved in her father's activities. But this report was used by Mark Feldman, a partner at Henderson & Associates, in an attempt to discredit my firm and damage my professional reputation. Mark had stopped trying to reach the stage. He was standing frozen in the crowd, his face red with rage and humiliation. Mr. Feldman believed that by exposing this old scandal, he could force Henderson & Associates to terminate my contract. What he didn't count on was his senior partner's integrity and commitment to quality work over personal politics. I looked directly at Mark, my smile widening. The irony, of course, is that Mr. Feldman's own behavior has been far more scandalous than anything in this old police report. His affair with Mrs. Carter has been an open secret in Boston's legal community for over a year. His attempts to use his position to benefit his mistress have compromised his professional judgment, and his willingness to resort to blackmail when those tactics failed reveals a character flaw that should concern anyone considering doing business with Henderson & Associates. The crowd was in an uproar now. I could see Henderson near the side of the stage, his face grim but not disapproving. He'd given me the ammunition. He couldn't complain when I used it. In conclusion, I said, raising my voice over the noise, I want to assure everyone that despite these personal complications, the Henderson building project will be completed on schedule and on budget. Professional excellence doesn't have to be compromised by personal drama. I stepped away from the microphone as the moderator tried to regain control of the situation. The damage was done, though. The story would be in tomorrow's papers, spread across social media within hours, and discussed in every law office and architectural firm in the city. I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and deflecting questions. Near the exit, I spotted Andrea standing alone, her face a mask of shock and rage. Satisfied? She asked as I approached. Getting there. You've destroyed us both, you know. Mark's career is over, and mine isn't far behind. You destroyed yourselves. I just provided the documentation. This won't bring back our marriage. I don't want our marriage back. I want you to understand what you took from me. And what was that? My dignity, my self-respect, my faith in the people I loved. I studied her face, looking for some sign of remorse or understanding. For 18 years, I believed in us. I believed in you. And you threw it away for what? A few moments of excitement with your boss? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And when I found out, instead of apologizing or trying to make amends, you tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. You and your friends spread lies about my mental state. You tried to make me disappear. So you decided to make us disappear instead? I decided to show you what consequences look like. She shook her head. You used to be a good man, Neil. I used to be a weak man. There's a difference. Andrea walked away without another word, leaving me alone in the emptying exhibition hall. Through the windows, I could see the lights of Boston Harbor, the same view I'd had from my office window for the past year. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. Press is asking for interviews. You ready? I typed back, send them over. The war was over, but the victory lap was just beginning. 3 hours later, I was back in my office, fielding calls from reporters and potential clients. The story was already trending on social media with hashtags like Architect Revenge and Boston Legal Scandal. My firm's website had crashed from traffic, and my assistant had stopped counting interview requests after the 20th one. Jessica knocked on my door, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that could have lit up the harbor. Congratulations, she said, popping the cork. You just became the most famous architect in Boston. Famous or infamous? Does it matter? The phone hasn't stopped ringing. We've got 3 new project inquiries already, and it's only been 4 hours. She poured 2 glasses and handed me one. To revenge, she said, raising her glass. To consequences, I corrected, and we drank. As the evening wore on, the calls gradually tapered off. The reporters had their stories, the clients had their answers, and the industry had its scandal to dissect. I sat alone in my office, looking out at the harbor and thinking about the man I'd been a year ago. That man had been invisible, ignored, dismissed. He'd accepted scraps and called them meals, endured humiliation and called it marriage, watched his life crumble and blamed himself for the destruction. This man was different. This man mattered. This man had power and respect and the ability to shape his own destiny. The transformation had come at a cost, my relationship with Chloe, my faith in human decency, perhaps even my own soul. But some prices were worth paying. My phone buzzed one final time, a text from an unknown number. You win. I hope it was worth it. M. I deleted the message without responding. Mark Feldman had said everything that needed to be said at the press conference. His humiliation was complete, his career was finished, and his reputation was in ruins. Andrea would survive. She was too smart and too connected to disappear entirely. But she'd never again have the kind of power and influence she'd wielded at Henderson and Associates. The scandal would follow her wherever she went, a permanent reminder of the choices she'd made. As for me, I had everything I'd wanted: success, respect, and the satisfaction of seeing my enemies brought low. The Invisible Man had become the most visible person in Boston's architectural community. I finished my champagne and turned off the lights, leaving the empty office behind. Outside, the city sparkled with possibility, full of new projects and new challenges and new opportunities to prove that Neil Carter was a man who mattered. The ghost had become flesh and bone, and he was hungry for more. The war was over, but the victory would last forever.